Hey Assaf, um, welcome to this webinar, which is part of the AgentCraft hackathon. So Assaf, for whoever doesn't know, is both the head of AI in Monday and the creator of the very famous um, open source project called GPT Researcher. And in this session, Asaf is going to describe this project. And well, Asaf, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Nir, and thank you for having me. And hello, everyone, and thank you for your time spending here. So I'm just going to go through in this lecture a bit about what is GPT Researcher and why do we need yet another web research agent in the market. And then we're going to discuss more about the architecture of the considerations in building production-ready agent, and then how we eventually also evolved to a multi-agent framework. So as I started, I think one of the big main questions that I got, I think early on was, why do we need GPTR? And the more obvious answers to this is that, as most of you probably know, LLMs are trained on outdated information. So just asking LLMs to research questions are probably not really relevant to our current time. At least for now, most LLMs are bounded to around 1K words per generation. Whereas in research, you probably expect around 8 to sometimes 20, 30 pages for a decent research report. Now, I think the more important aspects of why we need a research agent like this is, one, Perplexity, ChatGPT, they all support web search. But when you really look behind the details, you find that the amount of information or the amount of sites that they actually scrape to answer a question are very limited. So GPT Researcher in this case, in average, researches around 20 to 25 web pages per research task. And I think even more so, you could say, well, if I'm building an LLM and I want to do some research as part of an LLM environment, just using web search engines is also not enough because they usually either contain too much information and too little information. So introducing GPTR, in case you don't know, it's an open source autonomous research agent. It's actually optimized for a multi-agent environment, and I will show that later on in the presentation. And it currently has around 15,000 stars. We have a very big Discord community of actually almost 5,000 developers who have helped contribute a lot to this project as we built it. And I think what we've tried to do as a community is not just build a research agent that is very highly customizable, so you could use any LLM you want, any search engine you want, various customization options, but mostly we've optimized for performance. So you get a very comprehensive report for an average of like 1 cent per report in terms of costs using LLMs and search providers. So I want to dive a bit going from left to right about how is GPT Researcher built. And I think my goal here is to kind of inspire you to kind of think about how you would build your agent using all kind of techniques that we've leveraged across our time around 2 years of building this. So let's start from the left. You start with a research task. The very first thing that GPT Researcher does, which we actually built early on, was based on a research task, we generate a dynamic agent. Now, what does this mean to generate a dynamic agent? It means that we basically generate a system prompt. We generate a system prompt that defines a more specialized focus on what this research agent is. So for example, if let's say I ask about travel, create me a travel plan for 7 days in Paris, then our agent would be, an output would be something like, you are a travel planner, and you're an expert in finding the best places A, B, C, D. Now, why do we do this? This is not just nice to have. We do this because we've actually tested this internally and found that when you do a bounded system role, for a research task, it actually improves both the generation of research questions and also the report generation. So this was actually a pretty interesting test, but it's very I mean it's very interesting perspective to how you can kind of like dynamically create agents as you go. So once we've created the agent, we then do another very interesting step, which some call corrective RAG, others call it differently. But basically, if you just ask an LLM to generate research tests, so for example, let's take something more practical, like what are Trump's assassination attempts? So if you just ask an LLM to generate research questions from that, it doesn't know what are his attempts. So probably the research tasks would be much more generic. So what we do is we call a search engine, we get initial results based on your original task, and with that context, we generate research queries. And again, this is another step that improved even more the planning of the research. And what GPT Researcher does after that is for every one of those research queries, it generates in parallel various search queries to get search results, and then scrapes each one of those documents in parallel. Finally, we chunk all the research results into a vector database, which again, super customizable, and you can choose any vector database you want. But then here is another interesting fact. We actually implemented this with what is called a contextual retriever. And we implemented this a year ago as a community. And only recently, Anthropic released a paper that shows that this is probably the best retrieval technique that they found at Anthropic. And what is contextual retriever? It means that you chunk the documents on the insertion, but when you retrieve, you only retrieve a subset of each of the document that is relevant contextually to the research question. So you don't just get a list of chunks that were most related, you get a pieces of content within the chunks that were most related, which gains another improvement in filtering just the right information from a research task. Now, why is this very important? Because if you think of ordinary RAG techniques, you're chunking those somehow. I'm not going to get into the chunking techniques now, but you're chunking them somehow. And then usually you just get the most relevant documents. And within those documents, there's a lot of probably irrelevant information, which only hurt the context of generating reports. So at this stage, assume that you've gotten very decent sources. And then finally, this step is pretty trivial. We use an LLM to generate the final report. And how do we basically create reports that are 8+ pages long? Is that what we actually built again as a community? Is we parallelize the generation of the report into the various outline plan, and then we in the end concatenate all that report into one final report. So in theory, you could generate research reports of over 100 pages. Depends on your preferences. So that's basically how GPT Researcher works. Now, when you see this whole process, I think I hope you appreciate more what it means to generate a research report in less than a minute in 1 cent cost, using so many different AI steps along the way. So it sounds generally that GPT Researcher probably does what you want. Then the question is, why do we care about multi-agents? And this was a very interesting experiment that we partnered with LangChain around LangGraph over a year ago. We built this together and kind of thought about first, why would we care about a multi-agent environment? And then B, how does a multi-agent environment improve the quality? Because I think as you've seen, a lot of this quality, I mean, you could probably reach already a pretty decent quality. So I think it's interesting just to look a bit in the past or the last 2 years, just to understand how much we evolved. So we started with zero few-shot prompting. This was around 2 years ago. You put a few examples in the prompt. Oh my God, it creates amazing results, right? And then LangChain came out, and LLM chains became popular, basically chaining various LLM calls. And then came function calls, which gave us the ability to create calling tools with autonomous reasoning of LLMs. Then came ROG pipelines, which this was where GPT Researcher really hit it off. And now we're at multi-agents. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this, which I assume most of you know this, is that my assumption is that we've finally reached, I would say, a plateau in just the complexity of evolution of how agents can and will work. My belief is that multi-agents already give so much power to create endless opportunities, but also on the other hand, they're super complex to build, and there's so many still drawbacks. And I'll give you one example of a multi-agent challenge that we're dealing with, I think, across the world is what they call compound hallucination. So when you have one agent talking to another agent, talking to the third agent, and assume that every agent has a 90% accuracy, your end result would be around 70%. So multi-agents still have a lot of challenges, and we're not going to get into those today, but this is why we have Nir and Nir's information that he's sharing as an open source online to really help kind of help see how you can improve those limitations. So this is not me, this is Andrew Ng, and he basically said that this is probably the most important, AI agent workflow is probably the most important and massive progress this year, and he urges everyone to work that works in AI to pay attention to it. So if you're working in AI, you're in the right place. So what is a multi-agent framework? It's basically a framework that is designed to help support multiple autonomous agents as they interact with one another. And I think when you think about it, it's a lot about communication. I think Harrison from LinkedIn just last week or a few weeks ago released communication is all you need. And I think there's a lot of context to that understanding is that basically when you go into a multi-agent environment, which we understand is probably the plateau of where we're going to invest a lot of the next few years, the better the communication, the better the results. I think that's as simple as I could say it. But there are a lot of pros, right? I told you that why would we invest in a multi-agent when we already have a really good agent? There's a lot of pros, not only about improving quality, but also about scaling as you grow as an agent. And I think a good way to think about this, and I'll give context to my work at Monday and before that at Wix, is that when you're building, let's assume that you've built a good agent and you've now succeeded, you have a company, you've raised money, and you have a big team that you need to work with to build this and scale this up. Imagine scaling up the GPT researcher I showed you originally. It's going to be very, very complex as engineering team. And also think about the conversations with product and everyone involved. So you start talking about, yeah, we're going to invest in the vector database. We're going to base in an agent, like who even understands what that means, right? But when you bring it to a multi-agent conversation, then all of a sudden you can start to break down a complex task into what are the roles as we would have done them as humans, what are the roles that we need in order to achieve this task? And then it becomes a super interesting conversation. Like people start talking, hey, we need a writer, we need a researcher, we need a publisher, we need an editor. And then the conversation becomes much more natural. But then obviously, separation of concerns, it's in terms of system design, it's much easier to understand workflows with more human understanding and less technical. And I think one of the most exciting things about multi-agents, this is the last point I have here, is that it can handle nonlinear workflows, meaning when you saw a GPT researcher, the original, basically it was a chain, right? You start from A, you get to Z, and you're done. Multi-agents create a completely new paradigm of workflows where they're non-linear. They could go up, they could go down, they can go left, they could stay in a loop for 4 times until they get a complex problem correct before they move on. And I think this is what's so exciting about multi-agents, and I'll show you an example in a second. But just before that, let's just follow a few use cases, because I think there's just so much things you could think about as how to solve problems with multi-agents. So for example, you got math solving on one side, which is the more naive approaches, right? You have one agent that is a conversational agent, and you have an agent that is really good in math. So one agent can use the other agent to complete complex tasks. Let's look at the other. I'm going to go through all of them, but just to take two more examples. So multi-agent coding is another great example, and this is what we've built at GPT Researcher, is you have a commander, you have a master that understands the general flow and plan that he wants to execute, and then he starts to trigger the various specialized agents in a non-linear workflow to complete a complex task. The third, which I think is super interesting, and the way when I think about conversational interactions, I kind of imagine Sims. So when you think about Sims, it's a multi-agent framework, right? You have different agents that are living and conversing with each other, and there's not necessarily a start and an end to that kind of workflow. And there's just so much more. I'm not going to go into it, but it's just more to inspire you. So back to GPT Researcher. Let's try to walk through this together because I think there's a lot of steps here that are interesting to take some inspiration from. And as we go through the process, I think you'll also understand how powerful this became for us as a very large community, how we can now build and improve GPT Researcher as we go much easier. So first of all, I'll start from the end. We've improved output quality by 40%. This is a very important fact because this alone is the reason why to try to build with multi-agents. So you remember how GPT Researcher works. Now, just to clarify, GPT Researcher that you saw earlier is this. It's this one. Now we see the agent in a multi-agent environment. And just as FYI, one of the things we've built as a community is to allow you, any of you AI developers, to simply install GPT Researcher with a Python package, pip install GPT Researcher, and you can include him into your own multi-agent framework. So let's walk this through. We have the task. Then we have a browser agent that browses the internet for initial information about this task. And then the browser agent passes all this information to the editor. The editor's role is to plan and monitor the research process. So the editor gets this initial information, and then we have support for human in the loop at this step. So the editor basically starts going through a loop with a human interference. Here is my plan. What do you think about this plan? The human can give feedback to the plan, and that's how you kind of go through this loop together with the AI to really get a better sense of control. And I want to just say one thing about human in the loop. I highly encourage, probably, it'll be very hard for you to convince me otherwise that you don't need a human in the loop in your multi-agent framework. If you're building a product for users, even just the value of giving them the option to control a bit of the process improves conversion and improves user experience. It's all about control and trust with AI applications, which is why this is a very important step. So once the human and the editor finalize and agree on a plan, it then does the same process as we saw earlier, but this time the editor triggers various multiple GPT Researcher instances that does everything you've seen earlier in parallel, but then the final research report is passed to a reviewer. The reviewer, based on initial guidelines, so for example, you could say, I need the research to be in this format. I need the research to be in this language. I need it to focus on this information. So it reviews the research report, and then it creates dynamic feedback. That's the output of the LM. It passes that to the revisor. The revisor gets the report and the feedback and creates a new report that is passed back to the reviewer. And this process goes on for as much time as needed until the reviewer is satisfied with the final report. And this, I think, is where we saw most of the 40% increase come from. Just having that extra verification steps between agents until they're satisfied highly increases the output results. Another thing I want to say about this is that this is not an easy problem. One of the problems that we found very challenging is actually getting an LLM to say when he's fine. Because I think one of the challenges with LLMs is that they're optimized to satisfy you. So if you give them an instruction to create feedback, they will always create feedback. So now you need to start to guardrail that kind of prompt engineering with also being very cautious about giving feedback. So it's a very sensitive balance. And obviously, everything I'm explaining here is open source, so you could just go into the code, into the prompts, you could just see everything I'm explaining and how we tackled all these challenges. And then finally, once all those reports are finalized, they go to the writer, all the reports together, and the writer generates the final report, passes it to the publisher. The publisher is in charge of publishing the final report into various formats, and that's where the multi-agent process ends. And I think from our experience, LangGraph is definitely leading the way with building scalable production-ready interfaces. I'm saying this objectively. It's also from an enterprise perspective, both from Andy and Wix, we've tried various multi-agent frameworks, and LangGraph is currently on production. So this is, I think, was very, very high level. There's just so much more that we could dive into for every bits and bytes of this. But again, if any of you are interested and want to learn more, you can go ahead into GPT Researcher and try it out and join our community. And I want to end with one last slide, is that when we think about multi-agents, we imagine agents that you work with data and are conversational. But multi-agents have endless use cases. Just go, if I was you, I would go wild. Don't go for the ordinary demo agents that we see online. Try to think wild about all the different use cases. Imagine drones communicating with another to complete daily delivery project, or home robots. How would a home with various robots look like somewhere in the future, right? Which need to converse. So anyways, everyone go wild. And if you want to learn more information about GPT Researcher, I would love any feedback, any ideas to how to improve it even more. So thank you so much. And thank you, Nir, for having me.
Well, that was fascinating. And we have a question here in the chat from Maisa. She, I think, asks, what about integrating learning, reinforcement learning, if it improves the quality of the results massively, if at one specific action node and human in the loop is used dynamically?
Can you repeat it? Maybe you can try to clarify that question for me.
I think she wants to ask if there is a place to integrate some human in the loop within the GPT researcher.
Okay. So for GPT Researcher as an agent, no. Again, always happy for feedback. I would love any direct message about this if you have any ideas. But as an agent, no. As a multi-agent, yes. So as I've showed in the architecture earlier, there is an actual component for human that you could go into the open source and customize it yourself. But just I think it's worth also saying that this is why multi-agent system is so scalable, because it's just a graph with nodes. So if you say, hey, I want to add a human in the loop just before writing the report, or I want the human to be the reviewer and not have a review process being automated, you could just add another node for human, so with a few simple lines of code. So I hope that answers the question. But
I also have a question maybe about the whole process. What did you have in mind when you just started all of this project? Did you know this is where you wanted to go? Did you think that it's going to get this far on this direction? Yeah.
The backstory for GPT Researcher was that Auto-GPT came out.
Mhm.
And I'm sure everyone knows Auto-GPT by now. And it just immediately my own itch was wow, if I could have Auto-GPT do research online. And again, it's important to remind everyone this was 2 years ago. That's when the project when GPT Researcher was created. and it just didn't work. Auto-GPT didn't work. It got stuck in infinite loops. It would create plans over plans over plans. It would eat my OpenAI balance within 5 runs. And so I said, I'm just gonna try to take whatever inspiration I have from here. And by the way, the inspiration for Auto-GPT was the plan and solve paper, which is also linked in the open source project. It's written there until today, which is a paper that explains how you use an LLM to plan before execute. So just all that inspiration together got us building GPT Researcher. All the rest is just a community. Everything else you see that it evolved is just a community just building it with the mission of democratizing research.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And also something else that I wanted to ask is, what kind of interesting problems did you have along the way?
So I think I mentioned some of them. I think the most challenging part by far is retrieval. When you really
Mhm.
think about what is GPT Researcher, it's basically a search problem. If I found the right information, all I need to do is ask an LM to write about it. Um, and just constantly refining to reduce hallucinations, reduce uh, many times irrelevant information being generated. So is that considered hallucinations if it's information that was actually passed to the LM to write about, even though it wasn't the information you were looking for?
Mhm.
Just optimizing that with RAG techniques and parallelization was, I think, the biggest challenge.
And what about like when you have a big agent with a lot of components, if you have any error or some problem, something small, even small, the error can propagate. And then when you know that it happens, I mean, how do you trace it? And um,
Yeah, so we use LangSmith. GPT Researcher is powered by a LangChain under the hood and parts of it. So LangSmith helps us create observability. Then secondly, we also have tests. We've actually written tests for specific components, but you could also see how we've tackled testing agents on the GitHub open source. But there's always that one challenge, which I don't know how Neil, how you've found to automate it, but is some evaluation is still manual, unfortunately. Um, because there's no real way to really create deterministic outputs for LLMs, even if we knew what the right information and facts were, it would be very hard to test that automatically. So a lot of when we release a new version, there's always tests, manual tests that come into the picture of seeing that the actual reports are fine with our RAGAS evaluation.
mhm. Well, for me, half an hour wasn't enough about this, but yeah, I mean, I have the privilege to talk to you about this even beyond this conversation. But for whoever is interested more, I'll attach a link to the GPT researcher to this YouTube link. And I mean, I say that everyone is welcome to join, but I think you should say this, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, really, the goal here is to build an agent as a community. So I invite anyone who wants to join Discord, ask me the right questions. Obviously, happy for more contributions as always. Just feel free to reach out. And thank you, Neil, again for having me. This was super fun.
Hmm.
Build
Yeah,
good, build good agents, everyone.
yeah. So thanks again, Assaf. And this session is obviously recorded. Everyone can watch it again on YouTube. And now, after this, we have a session with Amit Svarzenberg from Microsoft for Startups. And Amit is going to talk about from concept to agent creation with Azure AI Studio. So, hey, Amit.
Hey, Neil. Thank you for having me. So, today, as you said, we are going to understand how to build an agent. Before talking to you on an agent, I'll do a quick talk about what is behind the scenes of the AI revolution, just like a few 5 minutes, and what is RAG, like from a AI perspective. So let me start with a quick presentation, and then I'll go from there to the AI Studio. Um, so let me share my screen. Okay. So my name is Amit, and as you probably know, AI is everywhere. This is why we're here, and Microsoft has invested $1 billion in OpenAI. But today we're going to talk about more than OpenAI, about the model catalog in the AI Studio, and how can you create an agent with it. After ChatGPT's success, Microsoft has invested another $10 billion in OpenAI. So this was the quick history that everybody knows about AI. But if we want to go and understand why is this important, why are we in this solution, and why we want to create a multimodality agent, let's look at a foundation model and understand a bit about it in 2 minutes, and then go deep dive into the AI Studio itself. So in a few years ago, two, basically, we were developing a small development models for simple tasks. For example, getting sentiment of text or understanding entities or object detection. Those were very, very small models compared to today, like $50,000 of training. And then with the money Microsoft invested in OpenAI, they have created with us a supercomputer, and they've created a foundation model, which is basically taking a lot of information, if it's text, images, speech, structured data, and 3D signals, and a huge amount of data, and training it on a big computer called a supercomputer. And now we have one API that can do question answering, semantic analysis, information extraction, image captioning, and more. So this is really unlocked in the industry, because now in order to create an agent, you need a very few line of code. If we are in the past had to combine all those API and found the exact routing of where to do what action, now we have a one line of code that can process images, text, and more. And this is what we're going to see on the AI Studio today. So again, what's special about those foundation models, which are super expensive? Just GPT-3 cost about $12 million to train. Llama, which we are going to talk to about it today as well, cost $5 million to train. We can see a big jump between GPT-3 to GPT-4. And we can even see emerging behaviors from those kind of training, but because we don't have time, I want to do a quick overview about RAG and do a deep dive on the AI Studio. So in order to get the agent talk to your data, you need to translate the data into vectors, which is how ChatGPT or OpenAI talks to your data. So let's say that you are creating a company called fake Donald's, and we sell fish burger in $8. And we're going to ask ChatGPT how much fish burger is going to cost. It will not know it because it doesn't have this information. So we need to embed the information. We need to make it into vectors. This is also what we're going to see today, how to do this embedding, those translation from text into vectors. So just to quickly understand, if this is a menu and we have a wine, which is fish, wine for seafood. This is the old way for us to search. Now that we have vector search, we can find fish under seafood. Let's see a quick example of embedding. We're taking a word like cat or kitty, and we see that we can convert them into vectors. You see that cat is in a vector formula is 1.5 minus 0.4, 7.2, and kitty is very similar. You can see that it's only difference start with a 9.6 and 9.5. And what we're actually doing on those vectors, those LLMs, large language model, we're calculating the distance between each of them. So now what we need is to translate our data into vectors so OpenAI can talk to them. And this is basically RAG. So now let's go to the AI Studio. This was like a quick intro while I opened an AI Studio project, as you can see on my screen. In order to go into the AI Studio, we just write ai.azure, ai.azure.com. And if you have an Azure subscription, everyone has a free $200 to use. And this, if you're a startup, you can always go into our Founders App program and get credits for free up to $150,000. So once you're in the Azure AI Studio, we are going to create a project. And we need to create a new app. In the new app, you can give it any name. Let's call it AgentCraft. And now we need to choose the subscription. The subscription is where the basically the money goes. If you get $200 for free, you get a subscription with a name. If you get credits for startups, you get a subscription with a name. And even if you have you're paying with your credit card, you will have a subscription. And then you have to build up a resource group. A resource group is basically a folder where all the resources are going to sit down. The resource that we're going to open today, for example, is OpenAI and LangGraph. All of them are going to sit under the resource group. You need to choose the location of the deployment. This is super important if you want the agent, for example, be compliant and only work under the EU, so it has to be deployed in Europe. Every country has its own laws, and compliance is super important. So you need to choose where you want to deploy. And then we will open an Azure OpenAI resource and Azure AI Search. So Azure AI Search is basically what's doing the embedding, doing the RAG for us, going to do the translation between the documents into vectors. So I already opened the project before we started, in sake of time. Okay, so let me view all projects. Let's refresh the project in Studio. It just opened a second ago. Let me create another one in parallel. Just create a new student. Just quick. We just use the resource that already open for us. ESTS and connect it into the search. And I choose my subscription. And I'm going to create the project. Right. So it is going to open the project for me. Another project should be opened over here. So it's really weird. You should have seen the project that I already created. So if you can see the project, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into Azure portal and find the resource directory. So this is the Azure portal. This is the studio. I can go into my resource group and look for the resource that I just opened. I gave it the name of 7223, and the new one was 746A. So let's do this. And this is the AI Studio. It's called Amit AI Agent, and I can open the AI Studio, which I opened before the session. So this is what you need to get. So it's supposed to be much simpler. I just, instead of waiting for this to finish, I did something before, but I didn't click the create project. And because I didn't create the create project, it created this problem. So I had to go to Azure. Now I've created a project, and this is what you are supposed to get. It's much simpler than you just saw. Just go to AI Studio, create an app, and create a project. And we have 20 minutes, and I'm still going to build a multimodality agent because it's that simple. So let's see. I have the model catalog. And as I said, creating an agent is more than OpenAI. We have so many open source models. We have SLMs, we have Llama, and so on. And to deploy them, you don't need to be data scientist. You can just double click on a model that you want to deploy. Let's take, for example, a P3 Vision, which is an SLM for images. So what do I need in order to deploy it and use it with an endpoint? It's super simple. Just choose what I want, click on the deploy, and create and deploy it on my own machine. I can also deploy it on a serverless machine that is running by Microsoft. But let's go to the most familiar one, GPT-4, deploy, and connect and deploy. This is the amount of effort need to deploy all of those models. So now I have a GPT-4o, which is only dedicated to my agent. There, great, and this is the new project. And now I can use it anywhere. Let's open another one. Let's say let's take the GPT-4o mini as well. Now I can find them on the chat. I don't know why it didn't just deploy them right now. Because I'm using the dog food version. Oh, okay, it's on. It did deploy them. Okay, great. So I have the GPT-4o mini version and deployed, and now I can see all the models over here. Let me redeploy on this project also GPT-4 or regular. Great, and now I can use it on the chat. I can add my own data. I can always view the code and take the code into my project. I can see the code in Python. You can see the code in C#, in JSON format, and more. So it's really easy to take what we're building over here and copy it into our project. You can also connect it to our Visual Studio and to our project with GitHub. You can also get everything right here. So it's also super easy to get it in your Visual Studio container. And I'm going to create a compute. And when it's going to be ready, I'm going to launch it into VS Code. And we're going to do it. We're also going to see today form flow. And but first, let's go into the chat ground and give him an instruction. Your AI assistant, AI people travel. It's like a super simple agent. Let's apply the changes. And now we can ask him a question. Japan, 2 days. Okay, so again, it's not surprising that you know how to answer this question. It will be super fast. Let's now add some more capabilities. Let's add audio capabilities. So it's super simple. I'm just going to enable speech in text-to-speech. Let's use Andrew. Let's acknowledge that it's going to cost money. And now I can speak to the microphone. 5 days in Japan with the family. Okay, so now I can also use my microphone, and it can also speak. I don't know, I don't know if you can hear him, but it took me like a minute, and I still have 14 more minutes to add more and more capabilities. So I can clear it right now. And now I want to add my own data. So in order to create this RAG, it's also super easy. So I can add my data over here. I can choose any data source that I want. Of course, I can use the blob storage and storage URL and a lot of those very complicated stuff. For this demo, I'm going to just upload files. Since it's a traveling agents, I'm going to upload a file that I already created on my computer. So it's about a trip to Japan. And I'm going to index the data. So what's happening over here is the entire embedding part, which we spoke about, is going to auto-create it for me. See, there is another text header embedding too. And it's deploying the embedded model for me and is going to create the data vector. Let me show how you can create a more complex RAG scenarios on your data. But now it's going to take the document. Let me show you what's in the document itself. So basically, what's nice about the Azure AI search is what it takes, even complex document with photos and everything, and you make them into vectors, which we call embedding. And again, you don't really need to understand how it works because it's just 2 clicks away, but I really like to know the behind the scenes. So it will take a few minutes to finish. And you can also deploy it right now as a web app. You can go embed into Teams application or take it into Copilot Studio, which I'm not going to see today, but it is another tool for creating a more advanced agents as well. You can always view the code, and you can see this is how I added the microphone inside, and this is how it uses Kubernetes services. You can get it in any kind of language. So everything that I'm doing via click of a button, you're going to accelerate your agent creation by because you don't need to look online to understand how to build up those stuff. This is the Azure AI search that I use on the documents. And so super simple, you can copy paste it, you can even open it on Visual Studio Code. Now we can play with the parameters, as you know, temperature and so on. And also we can add sections, for example, safety system message. For example, avoid harmful content, avoid unguarded content, avoid copyright, avoid jailbreak. And now you know that nobody can tell your agent to do stuff that it doesn't supposed to do. Just click insert and get all those safety messages built in. So not only that I've created an agent that I can speak with, you can speak to me, I added my own data, is also now responsibly AI can do stuff, and I can know that it can avoid jailbreaking. So it only took me 5 minutes. I also had the time to give a long lecture about what is AI, and I still have 10 more minutes. So because this AI Studio is super complicated, easy to use, but super advanced, we can do more stuff. So while it's ingesting the data, let's go back to the model catalog. So let's say that I don't know all the models on the open source model, and I want to understand them. So I can slice and dice down more than almost 2,000 models available in a 2 click of a button. You can just choose the interest type. We can see the benchmark between them, all different tasks. So we can understand which one is better for with usage. And this is why we're going to see prompt flow. We can take and combine them together. And also super important to understand that we need to evaluate our agent. How is our agent answer? Is it really good? Is it fluent, coherence, and so on? We're going to talk about it in a moment. So let's go to the model catalog. And let's see if let's go and deploy. And you know the new ChatGPT voice that you can speak with freely? So this is just GPT-4 or real-time preview. It still doesn't have an API, but you can also test it right now if you want. Let's go and deploy, and for example, P3 instruct. You can also test it before deploying, by the way, see the result. You can also deploy it on these visions. And I want to deploy to the serverless API. Again, I can't do it on East-US. If you remember, I choose the region at the beginning. So probably I am recommend to East-US 2 or Sweden Central are the best places because they have more capabilities. I don't want to try out which one of them are enabled by serverless right now, but on East-US 2, most of them will be. But again, almost everything is 2 clicks away. So let's go back to the playground. Let's see. So we added our data. This is supposed to take another 5 minutes. And let's deploy another model for a second. Let's deploy GPT-4o. I have already GPT-4o deployed, so it's called it GPT-4o2. Because I'm getting refreshed with the new UI, it's supposed to close it after the deployment. But I have like everyone's doing live demo. Those are the deployments that I did. Okay, you see the GPT-4o. I want to create now an agent with Assistant API. So in order to use Assistant API, I think that I need to refresh the project. We maybe move to the second one. It's weird. Usually the Assistant API is here, but because I'm on a new UI. Okay, I understand. They changed the UI. We have a big announcement next week. We're on our Ignite. So now they are changing the UI, but this is where they put the assistant playground. Okay, so everything is under playgrounds. Okay, so this is what I was looking for. So now I can create an assistant, but which can go and use APIs, which is much more advanced. If you remember, there is one that is going on and taking our data. This one not only can do file search and use the vector store, can also create code, and I can also add functions. If I already have code that I have written, for example, how to get weather, I just need to get an XML of the function that I wrote. For example, stock price or whatever APIs that you already did. And now I can use natural language to call those functions. For example, if I ask him MFST stock, he will understand what I'm saying because he will now call the get stock price. But ask him what is the I need to change the deployment type. This is again, I have a dog food kind of deployment, so I get in all those errors, but you won't get errors. But if I want to add function, you would actually go and call the get stock price for me. So if I will add more functions, I'll get a much more sophisticated assistant API. Again, there is also an instruction on how to do everything that I'm showing you today, and Mir will send it to you. So with 5 minutes left, we saw how we can use APIs with Assistant API. We saw that there are different playground, even the speech one that are in the real-time audio. You can also create images. You can also do it for healthcare and language. Let's see if our ChatGPT can also take images. Okay, so let's go back to the playground. And now let's go back to our demo, and now I can upload an image. Let's say this is the image that I want. Let's say that you are an assistant to tell people travel. And now I can ask him what to do. Let's say pick up an image without Superman site. What to do? I won't tell him where and when because it already works with images. Let's take an image of Japan. This look like Tokyo? Let's see if I have some. Okay, Paris. What to do? Okay, so now I have the capability of audio, I have the capability of image, I have also capabilities of videos, by the way. And now I understand the time and place. Again, you can also always look at the code over here, and it shows you what to do, how to send the images, how to encode them, everything that would take you a lot of time. And just to finalize it, I want to show you the prompt flow. Let's create a prompt flow out of this section. So basically, you can combine different LLMs. You can combine your own API, your own Python code. I have only 2 minutes left. Let me also move to the other project as well. Let's see if we finished creating the run. Your own data. No, it didn't finish loading the data for us. So let's look really quick. This is where you can also create more connection for your data connection. We have only 3 minutes, so I'm going to quickly show you. You can choose the storage, the block container, and everything on how to add data. You can choose when to index the data. So, for example, if the data need to be indexed every few hours, or it's an history book that need to be indexed only once. So this is where you do that. You will get it indexed, and eventually you will get it here, and you can and you will be able to upload the index into your data. You can also add data in the previous ways that I showed you. And just to finalize everything, at the end, you need to evaluate your project. So after you've done your agent, you created visual, audio, assistant API, and whatever. You have created a prompt flow, which we're going to see in a second. You can now do quick test on those and see the evaluation and see how elements are your answers. And again, everything is here, and you can just do it via code or via the AI Studio itself. And since I have 1 minute left, I'm going to go back to the prompt flow just to explain. This is a very powerful tool, which I create right now. Let's do a quick Q&A data. Let's clone this one. And once it's finished, this will be my last example. And I'll do a quick overview of everything that we showed today. It will take a minute. So while it's loading, I'll go do a quick recap and we'll finalize everything that is very prompted. Again, go to the model catalog, choose whichever models that you want. Go and then you can do it via the UI. You can go here and take all the endpoints that you get and put it in your applications, keys, or everything. You can go to the playground, choose any of the playgrounds that you want to work with. You can write whatever you want. You can add audio. You can add your own data. Okay, this is the indexing of Japan. So now, help people travel. Let's ask him about 5 days. I'm not telling him well. Say 8 days, 8 days, 7 days, and dog. I'm not telling him where and when. You know why he's going to give me only answers from Japan? Because this is the data. So it's not in the retrieve data because it's strict. I can tell him to not limit the responses. It will be more creative. But again, 7 days, these kids, and we'll go and tell me all of. Again, this is patterns that I have with rate limits only on my machine because it's currently been updated. But now it will only give me answers about Japan. it will be available for me in 42 seconds. Again, this is not something that will happen to you. This is just on my end. And at the end, after all of this, we can create a prompt flow, which can add nodes. We can combine few LLMs. We can get the input from the user and just flow it. We can create Python nodes. We can create more and more stuff over here, more tools. We can combine it into Visual Studio Code. It's a very, very sophisticated tool, but I think for this hackathon, it can really accelerate your development of creating the first and the MVP of the agent and then build from that. Since we are out of time, I'll just try to see 40 seconds more finished, and we can just see an example. Okay, great. So now he knows that I'm going to Japan, although I didn't tell him that I'm going to Japan, and it's not on the AI assistant settings because I have all this information from the RAG. If you remember, I created a RAG. It's all here in the code. I can just view code all the time, and of course I can deploy it into any of those forms. Thank you. I had 2 more minutes than I should have, but it's a big tool and
Yeah, it's okay. I may ask you 2 questions from the crowd. Just before we've finished. So Amir is asking, can we have the PowerPoint presentation later?
Yes, but you are better than this. I sent Nir an entire. If you remember, Nir, you asked me for the materials beforehand. There is the presentation over there and video recording, which are not done like by 15 minutes, we have 1 hour of explaining everything that you just saw here in a slower mode. What I did here is like more discovery session. You have those amazing AI Studio, which can do almost everything that you wanted right now. And if you click some buttons, you get a code that you can copy paste or upload into a Visual Studio Code container, which is in the studio. But you now need to understand from those Lego pieces, what should I learn more or need to know more? And just I can show him something better. So what actually, when I want to know something, I'm just going here on the Microsoft Edge, it's free, and just ask a question. For example, code for Azure AI Search, or whatever. I can do it. Of course, it's not going to work right now because it's live demo, and although it's working all the time, it will not work right now. But it will give you answers. It will send you into the documents that you need to know online. I'm not expecting it to work. Let's refresh it one last try. No, it doesn't like do live demos. This is like Microsoft computers. Since Bill Gates had the blue screen, we all have to have those kind of problems when in live demos.
Yeah. Additional question that Bex Noel is asking is, what does the UI look like once you export it as a web app? Is the style easily adjustable?
Yeah, and you can also get a code. So it's a very simple UI. It's like white level is a chat box. And yeah, you can modify it very easily. It's basically you're opening a web app. You have the entire resources on your machine. So and you get the entire code in your machine. It's not like a serverless component. It's actually deployed for you, and then you get the code and the web app and everything on your resources.
Well, so I enjoyed it. I actually didn't know all about this, and I found it very comprehensive and very simple also to use. So I would personally give it a try, and I also recommend others to try it as well. And so we will attach links both to the slides and to your comprehensive demonstration of the 1 hour demonstration, also to this link. And that's it. Well, thank you again, Amit, for being here. And until next time.
And thanks everybody. I'm really looking forward to see what you build. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.